What's up, pretty gang? It's your favorite nail tech Peaches back with another video, and for tonight's video we are going to discuss how to get a really good shape on a stiletto set. Because if it's one thing that I'm noticing, I noticed that a lot of times people have a hard time with getting their stilettos all facing the same way, all the same length, all the same shape and size. So we want to really focus on getting a really good overall looking stiletto set. Okay, so before we go ahead and get into that, I do want to say I apologize for not having a new subscriber of the day, but my email is not loading any YouTube emails right now, so I can't even get one. Okay, but just be sure to follow me on social media, and I do have a bunch of coupon codes in the description, and of course, as always, subscribe and notifications on. So it didn't occur to me that I could go ahead and film this tutorial, tutorial tips, whatever. I could have shown myself doing the actual tips, but I was not preparing. I was not planning on filming this because it was a basic set, and I have recently did a lot of basic sets. But then I was like, you know what, I think one of my clients canceled. I think actually I didn't end up doing my cousin's nails because of the damage, so I figured, like, you know what, I'm gonna record this just in case. And it's good that I did, because like I said, my cousin's nails ended up being damaged. So I do have like really in-depth tutorials on how to do stiletto nails, but this one I really want to focus on where do we usually go wrong and how can we correct those mistakes. Okay, so first thing is first, in shaping your tips, you want to make sure that the tips are still sidewall to sidewall. So you can see right here, based on where the acrylic is going, you can see none of the tips are like dug into. They're both sides are completely glued onto her natural nail. I noticed a lot of people, when shaping the tips, they shape a little bit too much. Okay, so just avoid doing that. Shape only as much as what you need to really take care of the tip and make sure it fits their natural nail. Okay, so if you do not do that and you over file and over shape, what's going to happen is you're going to have gaps missing near the natural nail that's supposed to provide a support, and then you're going to have the mistake of nails that are too weak, okay, not strong enough, which is a whole other conversation in itself. So as far as application, I'm showing in real time because I feel like it's important to show you guys by sidewall to sidewall. This is what I mean. Look at how the acrylic is completely covering the natural nail in the cuticle area, all that stuff. You have to make sure that this step is done. If not, this is also going to be a problem when you go ahead and file, because you're going to have a lot of gaps and missing coverage. And for stiletto nails, it's very, very important that we have as much strength and coverage as possible. So there is a very thin line between too bulky and just right, and as well as too thin. So this is why I look from all sides. Naturally, stiletto is going to be thinner than any other shape just because of there's less, I always describe it to people as, because there's less tip, right? It makes the stiletto the weakest shape because there's less surface area. Everything comes to a point. So if you figure square is the strongest shape because it has the most surface area, which means more acrylic, and it does not come to a point. Then you have coffin, and then you have like the almonds, the ballerinas, all those things, and then stiletto. You have to make sure that the tip is thick enough that it's not going to automatically just break at the tip, because that is also a problem. But you have to make sure that it's not bulky to the point of you're going to take forever to shape. Okay, so notice how my first bead is a decent solid bead, okay, because we want to be able to fan this up, right, and spread it out so we get our coverage up there, right? Keep that acrylic nice and smooth. And what I like to do is I just bring it down as one large mass. Now gravity is going to help us with this because no matter what, it's going to come down to the point. But to make sure that we can get a nice point automatically, because usually that is the part that is really hard for people, I'm going to take away, you see how I just swiped away the majority of that bulk? Because once it gets to the tip, we don't need it to be that bulky. So basically what we're doing is guiding the acrylic down and using our brush to just guide it to the shape, like always. But you have to be way more conscious of what you're doing because we need it to come to a perfectly straight middle point. Okay, so you can see how easy it is that if I were to use my brush to guide the acrylic the wrong way, it already can throw off my shape. So that is something to take in consideration. Even if your initial shape of the tips is extremely straight and perfect and extremely center, you could still run the risk of having a oddly shapen stiletto just with the application alone. So just no matter what, just make sure that you are working with beads that aren't super wet. You can see mine's. They're good enough to be like molding, but not wet enough that it's gonna get everywhere, because that is gonna be your worst nightmare. Okay, so as you can see, I'm just still making sure full coverage, because with stilettos we need to kind of go up into those areas to help get a point, because the last thing you want to do is shape just the tip. And I see that as a real problem that people struggle with a lot of times when they say, like, you know, stiletto is one of the hardest shapes to do. They end up shaping what comes only at the free edge and not what's next to the nail. Everybody is going to get a different looking stiletto simply just because of how their nails go. Now, this particular client, I have told her before that, you know, square or coffin is more flattering for her than stiletto, but she actually really likes stiletto. So every now and then, you know, she dips back into it. Sometimes she has phases where she keeps it, and the reason being is because of how her natural nail beds are shaped and how her nails are. It's really hard to get like a straight up and down line from her natural like sidewall nail groove area down to the point. You can see that even after I'm all the way done, her natural nail bed is like pretty straight down. As you can see, if you look around the cuticle area, normally you would want that to be like coming towards a nice taper towards the tip. And honestly, on her, no matter how I shape it, it's gonna come down straight and then come to a point. If you can see what I'm saying, look next to her natural, like look next to her finger, how it comes down straight and then starts to taper. There's nothing I can do to correct that in her case, because if I go ahead and keep trying to go up, file, what's going to happen is I'm going to overfile and it's going to get rid of all the product. And I guess you'll have the illusion of what you want, but on the sides, there would be no acrylic, okay? Because some people, like I say, every shape is not for everybody. So please assess for your clients and let them know that, hey, you know, this shape on you might cause these following results, okay? Stiletto is not for everybody, especially for people who have, you know, vigorous jobs or working with their hands a lot. I'm gonna tell you that right now, because the tip will come off, okay? And when I mean the tip, I mean the very tip, not even where the natural nail and the, you know, the tip connect. I'm talking about the point. It can come off, okay? So here I am making sure I have enough product that it's going to have the strength, and that's something that's going to be personal preference, you guys. That's something that's going to take you time to discover what is the right amount of product for stiletto for the type of nails that you do. You can see what I do is I typically keep it like, instead of tapering down from a lot of product in the cuticle area and then, you know, slope down to very little, I personally like to keep an even amount, so when I turn to the side it looks pretty even, you know what I mean? There's no real slope or anything like that. And that's just what works for me and the type of tips I use. You guys know I use tips from the Nail Supply, nothing fancy. The stiletto is gonna have a curve on it. Some people don't prefer that look, but honestly, they don't stay as curved as some of the other shapes, simply because when I file, a lot of that curve kind of goes away because so much of the tip is gone, right? So really what we're going to be talking about next is the actual shaping, because a lot of this is the acrylic, yes, but even if you lay your acrylic perfectly, you can still kind of F it up with shaping. So here's the application. Now that particular nail, she doesn't have a nail in that one because she did have some lifting. And here's a tip: if you do have some damage on your nails, and she's been doing okay with square, it's been growing out, it's not major damage or anything like that, but upon shaping the tips for stiletto, you will know if your nails are weak or not. I'll tell you that, because it will rip your natural nail. And I started noticing a tiny little tear in the area that was already lifted. It didn't hurt or anything because it was not attached already on the very tip. So we was just like, you know what, let's not do it. So that's the story behind that finger. But you can see for stiletto, look at how I'm holding it, right? I'm using my finger to support underneath that tip. I usually do this regardless, even with the other shapes, but you want to do that even more with stiletto because it's going to help balance. You see, it's going to help balance the nail and you'll be able to find your center. Okay, because what you don't want to do is spend so much time filing on one side. See how I'm going up into the sidewalls, like near her natural nail and her skin? You don't want to spend so much time on one side going back and forth that's how it gets pointing one way or another way. We want to just do a couple of times on each side until we are happy with the point of the tip as well as the taper. Okay, so you can see I'm checking the sides so much because, as I said, how her fingers are on her natural nails, she has a much longer nail bed, right? So it's, I guess you could say, average sized as far as width, but like they are a little bit longer, okay? And so this is what causes that her natural nail, looks like it comes straight down and then it tapers. Instead of just like a straight up taper from, see that area from there all the way down. And some people it's gonna be like that. You try hard to make it look like a one seamless taper, but like I said, it just depends on the client. So you can see the angle that I'm holding it at. The reason why I'm not filing under is because you will start to cut into the sides of the natural nail, okay? So you can see every so often I reset myself, I hold my file vertically. This is gonna help you get a really, really, really pointy tip. So you see what I'm doing right here? I'm grabbing, make sure that I'm not cutting her, angling my file, and basically you want to angle it straight up against the tip like this. And doing this is going to give you the pointiness that you want. But look how strict I am with holding my file. Look how rigid it is. I'm not letting it go all over the place, and this is how I'm able to get such a nice point and a nice taper, okay? So I know a lot of people do pre-shaped tips with stiletto, which is good, except for sometimes they are not the most flattering on everybody because it's already a pre-done stiletto. So it's like you can go skinnier, but you can't go wider. And some people, based on their nail beds, they need a little bit of a wider start, because there is a such thing as too skinny, okay? I will say that right now. You don't want to taper so much that there's barely any substance in the middle and it's all super skinny. Again, that is preference, but in my personal opinion, everybody needs a little bit of a different look just because of how their hands are and the look of their fingers. So this is why I like doing it straight from scratch. I build all my shapes from square. I don't use any scissors or anything. I just file, and that's pretty much it. So you want to constantly compare the shape like to each finger, because number one, that's gonna be how you get your length like correct. And when you need to like adjust the length, you're going to just focus on the tip and hold that file straight against the tip, and you're gonna kind of like, I guess, taper in away, like keep going, and it's gonna shrink the tip, the length, okay? I think I show it somewhere further into the video. See this right here? If you keep doing this and keep closing in, see this right here? Not only is this sharpening it, but depending on how you angle the file, it will also shorten the nail. I know it doesn't look like it, but because you're right up against that tip, like this right here, how I'm right up against the tip, if I keep going specifically like that, the nail is eventually, it's going to slightly shorten. So you're going to need to continue to check each nail to see, okay, is this getting shorter? Is this what I wanted? Blah, blah, blah. Just to give you guys an idea of how to keep track of the length and the shape to make sure they're all the same. Okay, you have to take breaks periodically so you can see that. A lot of times I do notice like people, it's hard for them to get that perfect like pointy tip. And so once again, this is how, okay, it's how you hold your file. Stiletto has everything to do with how you hold your file and how you do your application. If you feel like there's any bulkiness, you can take your file higher up into where the natural nail would be, okay, like right up against the skin, and just be careful. That's it. Now you can see with these, the apex is way less than what it would be with the square, and that's because it, not to say it doesn't need as much support, it's just there's just way less surface area, okay? So right now I am comparing, and this is what you're gonna need to do. I do this anyways, like no matter the shape, but this is what's going to give you a very, very nice overall look to have a same shape and size with your stiletto, because that right there is, like I said, that's the thing that people most complain about. So this right here, I'm shortening it. So do you see what I'm doing to make sure that it's getting shorter? I'm focusing only on the tip. You see how my file is not really focused on any other place? I'm not trying to taper it more or anything, make it skinnier. I'm focusing just on the tip because of the length. So here we go. You can see typically one hand is going to be a little bit longer, or some may be, because of the way that we did application. On stiletto, what can happen is because gravity helps us out and we are trying to remove it, it can actually lengthen the nail, and you might not even notice because of course we're just taking the product off, you know? So this is why sometimes I will take my finger and kind of pinch the ends and after my brush kind of drags the product, because that ensures that like the nail is staying the same size and length, okay? So pretty much this is how I get a really good stiletto. I don't use any pre-shaped tips or anything like that. This is the best stiletto that fits her. If we were to go any skinnier or taper anymore, I would be cutting into her sidewalls, and that's how you notice, if you ever see someone's nails where you notice gaps on the side or anything like that, yeah, it's because they overfiled. Because what you don't want to do, how you know you're overfiling, because that's also like a common mistake, is you start to see acrylic color coming off, like rubbing off. You start to expose the nail tip itself, or you start to see dips in the side of the nail. And it's once those dips happen, it's hard to correct them, because the only thing you can do is either add more product or you're gonna have to file some more, and that takes a little bit of skill to do, right? So it's really just a lot of back and forth. You will get to the point to where it does come easier. I feel like you just have to have the patience, and you have to double, triple check. You know, I'm a person, I do this with my shapes anyways, but you're gonna have to double, triple check, like even more than you normally would, because it does make a difference. Okay, we do want those 10 pretty stiletto nails, all 10 pointing the same direction, the same type of taper, the same skinniness in the tip, because that's another mistake that I see, or that people complain about, is like the tips will be not all the same amount of skinny. So you see how like the tips, it's just the very tip that's super skinny. Well, you know, some people sometimes that like it's not a very even taper on all 10, you know, like the tip, some tips are skinnier, some middles are skinnier, and things like that. So the final last thing I like to do is go underneath to make sure that they're not too thick on the sides, but I don't want to do too much, because again, in these areas, having that to see if any like pieces are sticking out or anything like that, I'm gonna go ahead and file it away. Any excess in the natural nail, not to like get rid of her natural nail, but some people's like free edge, if you don't file it down a certain way before, it's gonna poke out a little bit. And this is not nail that, I don't want to say matters, but like the free edge, you know, something that you can get rid of anyways. So sometimes those will poke through, and you can kind of just file that away. But what you don't want is to be exposing anything that is beyond this. Okay, so we're not over filing here either. This is going to help us with the point as well, and just polish the overall polished look to make sure that everything is streamlined. Okay, so hopefully this tutorial helped you kind of in realizing like some of the extra steps that can go into having a really nice and pretty stiletto set. I know it takes a lot more harder work than like a square or a coffin, but honestly, once you identify maybe what your mistakes are, it's so much easier, trust me, because I've been there, done that. My stilettos used to be bulky, and I finally was able to streamline them, so I'm sharing with y'all. So as usual, I will see you guys in the next video.